Hiya, Bryn. Um, Another chapter of The Borrowers, perhaps? I just got off a call with Auntie Barbara and Far. We've been doing some Greek lessons, and I've been telling them stories so that when they go out to Greece next, they'll have a little bit of understanding of the history. Anyways, we are on chapter 16. Last we met, uh, the boy had pulled up the floorboards and brought with him some great borrowings, or givings, I guess. And even though Homily was a little upset, she really liked what he had to offer. So let's see what happens next. Chapter 16. Then began a curious phase in their lives. Borrowings beyond all dreams of borrowing. A golden age. Every night the floor was open, and treasures would appear. A real carpet for the sitting room. A tiny coal scuttle. A stiff little sofa with damask cushions. I don't know what damask is. Damask. Maybe it's a pattern. A double bed with a round bolster, a single ditto with a striped mattress, framed pictures instead of stamps, a kitchen stove which didn't work but which looked lovely in the kitchen. There were oval tables and square tables and a little desk with one drawer. There were two maple wardrobes, one with a looking glass. That means a mirror if we don't remember. And a bureau with curved legs. Homily not only grew accustomed to the roof coming off, but even went so far as to suggest to Pod that he put the board on hinges. "It's just the hammering I don't care for," she explained. "It brings down the dirt." When the boy brought them a grand piano, Homily begged Pod to put it in the drawing room. "Next to the sitting room," she said, "and we could move the storerooms further down. Then we could have those gilt chairs he talks about, and the palm in a pot." Pod, however, was a little tired of furniture moving. He was looking forward to the quiet evenings when he could doze at last beside the fire in his new red velvet chair. No sooner had he put a chest of drawers in one place than Homily coming in and out of the door to get the effect and made him try it somewhere else. And every evening, at about his usual bedtime, the roof would fly off and more stuff would arrive. But Homily was tireless, bright-eyed and pink-cheeked. After a long day's pushing and pulling, she still would leave nothing until tomorrow. "Let's just try it," she would beg, lifting up one end of a large doll's sideboard so that Pod would have to lift the other. "It won't take a moment." But as Pod knew very well, in fact, it would be several hours before, disheveled and aching, they finally dropped into bed. Even then, Homily would sometimes hop out to have one last look. In the meantime, in payment for these riches, Arietti would read to the boy. Every afternoon in the long grass beyond the cherry tree, he would lie on his back, and she would stand beside his shoulder and tell him when to turn the page. They were happy days to look back on afterwards, with the blue sky beyond the cherry boughs, the grasses softly stirring, and the boy's great ear listening beside her. She grew to know that ear quite well, with its curves and shadows, and sunlit pinks and golds. Sometimes, as she grew bolder, she would lean against his shoulder. He was very still while she read to him, and always grateful. There's a picture on the next page here about the borrowers rearranging all their new furniture. What worlds they would explore together, strange worlds to Arrietty. She learned a lot, and some of the things she learned were hard to accept. She was made to realize once and for all that this earth on which they lived turned about in space, did not revolve, as she believed, for the sake of the little people, nor for the big people either, she reminded the boy, when she saw his secret smile. In the cool of the evening, Pod would come for her, a rather weary Pod, disheveled and dusty, to take her back for tea. And at home there would be an excited homily and fresh delights to discover. "Shut your eyes," Homily would cry. "Now open them." And Arrietty, in a dream of joy, would see her little home transformed. All kinds of surprises there were. Even one day, lace curtains at the grating, looped up with pink string. Their only sadness was that there was no one there to see. No visitors, no casual drop-ins, no admiring cries and envious glances. What would Homily have not given for an overmantel or a harpsichord? Even a rain barrel would have been better than no one at all. She wants to show off her wealth. "You write to your Uncle Henry," Homily suggested him, "and tell him a nice long letter, mind, and don't leave anything out." Arrietty began the letter on the back of one of the discarded pieces of blotting paper, but it became, as she wrote it, just a dull list, far too long, like a sale catalogue or the inventory of a house to let. She would have to keep jumping up to count spoons or to look up words in the dictionary, and after a while she laid it aside. There was so much else to do, so many new books to read, and so much, now, that she could talk of with the boy. "He's been ill," she told her mother and father. "He's been here for the quiet and the country air. But soon he'll go back to India, did you know?" She asked the amazed Homily. Did you know that the Arctic lasts 6 months, and that the distance between the two poles is less than that between the two extremities of the diameter drawn through the equator? She's learning her planetary dimensions, I guess? Yes, they were happy days, and all would have been well, as Pod said afterwards, if they had stuck to borrowing from the doll's house. No one in the human household seemed to remember it was there, and consequently nothing was missed. The drawing room, however, could not help but be a temptation. It was so seldomly used nowadays. There were so many knick-knack tables, which had been out of Pod's reach, and the boy, of course, would turn the key in the glass doors of the cabinet. The silver violin, he brought them first, and then the silver harp. It stood no higher than Pod's shoulder, and Pod restrung it with horsehair from the sofa in the morning room. A musical conversation, that's what we could have, cried the exulted Homily as Arrietty struck a tiny, tuneless note on the horse-string. "If only," she went on fervently, clapping her hands, "your father would start on the drawing-room." She curled her hair nearly every evening nowadays, and since the house was was more or less straight, she would occasionally change for dinner into a satin dress. It hung like a sack, but Homily called it Grecian. We could use your painted ceiling, she explained to Harriet, and there are quite enough of those toy builder's bricks to make a parquet floor. Parquet, she would say, just like a harpsichord. Even Great Aunt Sophie, right away upstairs in the littered grandeur of her bedroom, seemed distantly affected by a spirit of endeavor which seemed to flow in gleeful whirls and eddies about the staid house. Staid, S-T-A-I-D. That's new. Several times lately, Pod, when he went to her room, had found her out of bed. He went there nowadays not to borrow, but to rest. The room, one might almost say, had become his club, a place where he could go to get away from things. Pod was a little irked by its riches. He had never visualized, not in his wildest dreams, borrowing such as this. Homily, he felt, should call a halt. Surely, now, their home was grand enough. These jeweled snuff boxes and diamond-encrusted miniatures, these filigree vanity cases and Dresden figurines. All, as he knew, from the drawing-room cabinet, were not really necessary. What was the good of a shepherdess nearly as tall as Arietti, or an outsized candle snuffer, sitting just inside the fender where he could warm his hands at the fire? He watched Aunt Sophie hobble slowly around the room on her 2 sticks. She'll be downstairs soon, I shouldn't wonder, he thought glumly, hardly listening to her oft-told tale about a royal luncheon aboard a Russian yacht, and she will miss these things. It was not Aunt Sophie, however, who missed them first. It was Mrs. Driver. Mrs. Driver had never forgotten the trouble over Rosa Pickhatchet. It had not been, at the time, easy to pinpoint the guilt. Even Cramfurl had felt under suspicion. From now on, Mrs. Driver had said, I'll manage on me own. No more strange maids in this house, not if I'm to stay on meself. A drop of Madeira here, a pair of old stockings there, a handkerchief or so, an odd vest, or an occasional pair of gloves, these, Mrs. Driver felt, were different. These were within her rights. But trinkets out of the drawing-room cabinet that, she told herself grimly, staring at the depleted shelves, was a different story altogether. She felt tricked. Standing there on that fateful day in the spring sunshine, feather duster in hand, her little black eyes had become slits of anger and cunning. It was, she calculated, as though someone, suspecting her dishonesty, was trying to catch her out. But who could it be? Cramfurl, that boy? The man who came to wind the clocks? These things had disappeared gradually, one by one. It was someone. Of that she felt sure, who knew the house, and someone who wished her ill. Could it, she wondered suddenly, be the old lady herself? The old girl had been out of bed lately and walking about her room. Might she not have come downstairs in the night, poking about with her stick, snooping and spying? Mrs. Driver remembered suddenly the empty Madeira bottle and the 2 glasses which so often were left on the kitchen table. Ah, thought Mrs. Driver. Was not this just the sort of thing she might do? The sort of thing she would cackle over back upstairs among her pillows, watching and waiting for Mrs. Driver to report the loss? Everything all right downstairs, Driver? That was what she would always say, and she would look at Mrs. Driver sideways out of those wicked old eyes of hers. I wouldn't put it past her, Mrs. Driver exclaimed out loud, gripping her feather duster as though it were a club. And a nice Mary Andrew, she'd look if I caught her at it, creeping about the downstairs rooms in the middle of the night. All right, my lady, muttered Mrs. Driver grimly. Pry and potter all you want. Two can play at that game. Uh-oh. Mrs. Driver is going to not find Aunt Sophie in the middle of the night, I fear. That is the end of chapter 16. We have chapter 17 left, chapter 18, 19, 19 looks like a very long chapter. There's even 20? Okay, there's 20 chapters. This book has to go back to the library, so I'm going to take it back, but I'll request it again, and hopefully we can finish soonish this summer. I would like to finish this summer. Thank you for listening. Hope you're having a good day. Bye for now. I love you very much.